Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the absolutely most significant geopolitical shifts of the 21st century. We're looking at how a really catchy economic concept completely transformed into an 11-nation geopolitical heavyweight that is aiming to rewrite the rules of global governance. Look, if you want to understand where global power is heading right now, you really have to understand this alliance.
Okay, let's dive right into this absolutely staggering number, 49.5%. Think about that for a second. That is literally half of all humanity, now represented by a single, rapidly expanding coalition. So we're not just talking about some standard diplomatic club here. This is an emerging demographic giant.
To demystify exactly what this bloc is and why it matters to us, we'll track its evolution through 5 key areas today. 1. The birth of BRICS. 2. The Great Expansion. 3. The power in numbers. 4. Building a new system. And 5. Challenges and the future.
Section 1. The birth of BRICS. From acronym to alliance.
It is honestly pretty wild to think that this entire alliance started out as an investment theory. Back in 2001, Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill coined the term BRIC to group together Brazil, Russia, India, and China, basically pointing them out as 4 fast-growing economies to watch. But by 2006, that theory turned into reality when their foreign ministers actually met up at the UN. Fast forward to their first official summit in 2009, and then the addition of South Africa in 2010. That added the S to BRICS and officially brought the African continent into the fold.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the underlying problem these nations were reacting to. The real driving force was a pushback against a unipolar, Western-dominated system. It directly challenged this long-held assumption that traditional Western economies would just permanently run the show forever. The stage was totally set for a massive shift.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Great Expansion, expanding the Global South's reach.
For over a decade, BRICS was this exclusive club of 5. Then came a historic enlargement. In January 2024, the doors blew completely open. Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates officially joined. A year later, Indonesia, Southeast Asia's largest economy, became a full member. Suddenly, you have an alliance that controls vital trade routes like the Suez Canal and holds profound, undeniable influence over global oil markets.
But they didn't stop at full membership. To manage all this massive international interest without getting totally bogged down, they introduced a highly flexible partner country tier in 2025. This lets nations across Europe, Eurasia, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Africa participate in dialogues and development projects without needing immediate full membership. It's an incredibly strategic way to cast a really wide global net.
Moving on to Section 3, the power in numbers, a shift in global gravity. Remember that staggering 49.5% figure we talked about at the start? When you realize this single bloc controls nearly half the global population, the implications are just massive. It grants them an unparalleled labor force, a huge talent pool, and a consumer market so vast that traditional economic powers literally cannot ignore it. Couple that demographic advantage with raw economic output, and the picture becomes completely undeniable. These economies together now account for roughly 40% of the global GDP. Measured by purchasing power parity. To put that into perspective, by several estimates, that actually surpasses the collective share of the G7. It is a fundamental shift of economic gravity right toward emerging regions. Furthermore, these 11 nations now drive 26% of all global trade. Through deep investment partnerships, they are rapidly strengthening what's known as South-South economic cooperation. That basically means they are relying less and less on traditional, Western-centric trade centers to do their business.
Section 4. Building a new system. Alternatives to Western institutions.
So how do you trade and develop when the global financial system relies heavily on institutions you feel just don't fairly represent you? Well, you build your own. Instead of relying entirely on the World Bank or the IMF, BRICS established the New Development Bank to finance infrastructure right alongside a contingent reserve arrangement for financial emergencies. And the big appeal here? They prioritized national sovereignty, without all the strict political conditions that are usually attached to Western financing.
Alongside these new institutions, they are making some really deliberate, calculated financial moves. Now, are we going to see a single unified BRICS currency tomorrow? Probably not. But they are actively working to reduce reliance on the US dollar.
By conducting bilateral trade using their own national currencies, like the Indian rupee, the Chinese yuan, or the UAE dirham, they are deliberately mitigating their exposure to foreign sanctions and crazy exchange rate volatility.
All of these economic moves really serve one central thesis: the promotion of a multipolar world order. Basically, BRICS is advocating for a global system where influence is distributed among several major powers, based on mutual respect, rather than being concentrated in a single unipolar bloc.
But hearing all of this grand ambition naturally leads to a pretty critical question. With 11 diverse member states and multiple partner countries, are they truly a unified front?
Section 5, Challenges and the Future. Managing Internal Contradictions.
The reality is, managing an alliance of this absolute scale is incredibly complex. Critics are quick to point out that these nations are definitely not in lockstep. Deep rivalries, particularly the ongoing geopolitical friction between India and China, can heavily complicate consensus building. Because they hold such differing views on trade, security, and foreign policy, many argue these internal contradictions severely limit their ability to act as a fully integrated geopolitical bloc.
However, supporters will counter that, hey, BRICS was never meant to be a strict political union or some kind of military alliance. Rather, it's a flexible platform coordinating on massive shared objectives, reforming global finance, expanding South-South cooperation, and promoting alternative development. As long as they align on these huge macroeconomic goals, complete political uniformity isn't actually required for them to be successful. Which brings us to our final thought today. As economic power steadily shifts away from the traditional West and toward the global South, we really have to ask ourselves, will BRICS evolve into a true, unified counterweight to Western institutions, or will internal differences keep it as a loose platform for developing nations? The answer won't just determine the fate of these 11 countries, it's going to write the rules for the rest of the 21st century. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.